Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today we're going to be doing the last of the brief history of the original USFL teams for at least the ones that have come back. And we are going to be doing the one that is the most prominent, the best, aside from maybe the Generals, the most known, the Philadelphia Stars. The Philadelphia slash Baltimore Stars were a professional football team from the United States Football League in the 80s. They were owned by a real estate guy in Miles Tannenbaum, and they were the most dominant team in the league. We all know that. They made it to all three title games, and they won the last two. They played their first two seasons in Philadelphia, and they played their last season in Baltimore. They were coached by Jim Moore and won the league's best 41 regular season games and 7 playoff games. Their founding was on May 11, 1982. USFL officially made by league owner and antique dealer David Dixon. The league's Philadelphia team would be owned by developer Miles H. Tannenbaum. He originally wanted to name the team the Stallions in honor of Rocky Balboa, who was named the Italian Stallion. But when Birmingham took that name quicker, he decided to go with the Stars. George Peerless was originally supposed to be the team's head coach, as he was an assistant coach for the Steelers, but he didn't coach them because he decided to get a job at Michigan State, and instead, they hired Jim Mora. In the 1983 season, their inaugural season, they played all their home games at Veterans Stadium, or known as some people by the Vet. They compiled the league's best regular season, going 15-3, and advanced to the USFL title game. Their doghouse defense allowed only 204 points in the 18-game season, which is the least in history of the entire league. The Stars were led by Chuck Fushina, who was a Heisman Trophy runner-up, and by receiver Scott Fitzke, and then they had rookie halfback Kelvin Bryant. They had rookie offensive tackle Irv Heatman, and rookie linebacker Sam Mills, and then a second-year safety in Scott Warner. The team also had an all-star punter by the name of Sean Landeta. At the end of the season, Kelvin Bryant was named the Player of the Year as he won MVP of the league. The Stars entered the playoffs as a top-seeded team, and then in the semifinals, they were able to beat the preseason favorite, Chicago Blitz, by somehow withstanding 7 turnovers and getting rid of a 21-point deficit to win 44-38 in overtime. And then they played the title game at Denver, but they lost to the Michigan Panthers 24-22. Just as they had against the Blitz, the Stars opened the game pretty bad and finished with a really good ending, as the Panthers had a 17-3 lead heading into the fourth quarter. But many observers of the time believed the Stars, Panthers, and Blitz were almost NFL-quality teams. But one of the few blemishes was the fact that, in terms of fans, they didn't really do that good. That year, they only ended up getting about 18,600 fans a game. And then with bad weather and then memories of, stuff involving the World Football League's Philadelphia Bell, it just kind of made the team look not great in terms of fan perspective for the first year. But in terms of their players, they're pretty good. So, people who made both the All-League and All-Star team included their tackle Irv Heatman, running back Kelvin Bryant, who also, as I mentioned before, ended up winning league MVP, which is pretty good. And then they also had their safety Scott Warner make both teams. Sam Mills made both teams, and their punter Sean Landeta made the All-Star team only. So overall, in terms of that, they were pretty solid. Their general manager Carl Peterson also ended up winning Executive of the Year. Now, heading into the 1984 seasons, they were still in Philadelphia, but then during the season, they had to play their postseason home games at Franklin Field due to the Philadelphia Phillies, where they were sharing stadium with, and because of that. And so the Stars, though, in the season ended up going 16-2 and completely destroyed the Arizona Wranglers 23-3 to win the title in the championship game. And it was the last professional football championship that Philadelphia ever got until Super Bowl 52 with the Eagles. So that was pretty good. And it was the first since 1960. The Stars actually became insanely popular thanks to being really good in 83 and then becoming even better, as they went from 18 to 28,000 fans a game. And then After the championship game, they played a really weird, cool, I guess, exhibition game against Tampa Bay in England, where they beat the Bandits when it was basically just, kind of the practice squad, I guess. But yeah, I mean, the team, both their losses, though, did come to the New Jersey Generals, but they did beat them in the divisional round, so it was pretty good for them. In terms of how their players and stuff did, once again, they had a lot, and this time they had even more. Though the All-Star team kind of held back a few players. The members of both teams were once again Irv Eatman, tackle. Um, Calvin Bryant was also on both teams again. And then that was pretty much it. But then there was a lot of one guys. So members of just the All-League team included guard Chuck Comiskey, center Bert Oates, nose tackle Pete Kugler, linebacker Sam Mills, cornerback Garcia Lane, safety Mike Lush, and then for the All-Star team, there was two guys. Quarterback Chuck Fushina was on the All-Star team, and punter Sean Landetta was on the All-Star team. Coach of the Year actually went to Jim Mora, and then Player of the Year to some people went to Chuck Fushina, and then Executive of the Year went to Carl Peterson. So it was pretty good. And then in terms of heading into the 1985 season, they actually had to relocate to Baltimore. So the owners, led by Donald Trump, made the decision to move into a fall season after the 85 season. So because the Stars realized that they were going to have to compete with the Eagles, they decided to move. And then years later, though, Tannenbaum said that even without having to go head-to-head with the Eagles, the Stars would have had to move because of the Phillies sharing the stadium and, problems with who was when they had to play and then the Stars had to play and stuff like that. So, yeah. So, without being able to play in Philadelphia, they would have always moved, but they moved to Baltimore. And it was a good move since just a few years earlier, the Baltimore Colts left to become the Indianapolis Colts, so they could try and fill the void there. It looked like they might have been kind of bolstered by a merge with the Pittsburgh Maulers, but as I discussed in their brief history, that team ended up just being so bad they couldn't even merge, so it didn't even happen. But Baltimore did welcome the Stars. They signed a broadcasting deal with the radio. They built some good relationships with the mayor. And then when they found out they couldn't play at Baltimore's Memorial Stadium until 86 because of the Baltimore Orioles owner, they were trying to see what to do. And eventually they decided to go to University of Maryland's Byrd Stadium in College Park, which was kind of far away from Baltimore. It was kind of just in a weird place, as it was kind of near where the Washington Federals were, which was a USFL team that moved that same year to go to Orlando. And so it was having to play in a pretty weird place, so just weird. So, but in terms of the 1985 season, due to the moving and stuff like that, the team actually did struggle a little bit to begin the year, but because of the Stars, they ended up winning 9 of their last 13 games, got a wild card berth, and they did it in front of an empty Byrd Stadium. But Baltimore fans were happy to, be there. And then, essentially, the team ended up going a pretty solid record. Overall, this was a weird time. As a result, attendance went down. They lost their home field advantage for the playoffs. ABC Sports was upset about how the attendance was going down, and they didn't really want to televise the playoff games. But eventually, the team went on to beat the Generals in the first round again, then beat the Stallions in the semifinals, and then beat the Oakland Invaders in the title game 2024 to win back-to-back titles. It was the final USFL game ever played, at least until the new league starts up in a couple months. When the grand jury of the federal thing, went to say how much the league had won, they didn't really give them that much. They gave them $1 or $3 because of antitrust law. And one of the major things that the jury had against the USFL was them leaving Philadelphia, which kind of hurts. But in a little cool note, number 19 was never used by any player in that one season because of the great Johnny Unitas from the Colts. So even though the season was really weird, the team, as you can imagine, once again had players who were really, really good on the All-Star, All-League teams. So in terms of guys who were on both of them, to make it 6 for 6, Irv Eatman was on both tackle. And then there were a few other single players. You had defensive end William Fuller make it on the All-Star team. Linebacker Sam Mills made it on both teams. And then safety Mike Lush made it on the All-League team. They didn't have anyone win any, executive or coach of the year this year. But hey, they still had a pretty good year overall that time. Their all-time leading players were guys who basically led the team in the stat all 3 years. Rushing yards leader was Kelvin Bryant. Their receiving yards leader was Scott Fitzke. And then their passing yards leader was Chuck Fashina. As for the players in the league, as you can imagine, there was a lot that had a lot of impact elsewhere or just big in the game. So to start off, these guys who were just an all-league or all-star team member once, twice, something like that. We're starting off with Scott Warner, who was a safety. He is in the College Football Hall of Fame. He played for the Falcons 1 year before going to the Stars, and then he played for the Saints a couple years after playing for the Stars. Mainly just a guy from the, USFL, and that was pretty much it. He didn't really do a ton. So, College Football Hall of Fame, that's pretty good, and that's pretty much all you can say about it. Part of a national title winner and the Bulldogs, yeah. Next, you have Carl Peterson, their general manager. Now, there's no list on where he would be, but he's probably the best GM in the league. You can make a case for a couple guys, but he's probably the best. He was the coach of the UCLA for a few years. Then he was a coach for the Eagles for a few years. Then he became the executive for the Stars. Then after the Stars, he actually ended up being the president and GM of the Kansas City Chiefs for 20 years. But, in USFL, he won the executive year twice. He was great. He helped make him win 2 different titles. And then he donated the league's original trophy until 2018. Where he donated to the Pro Football Hall of Fame to be in there. So he's a pretty class act guy, and he was definitely solid. Pretty safe to say that he is pretty good. He knew what to do. He got teams to be good, and the Stars teams won titles mainly thanks to him. Quarterback Chuck Fashina, he played for the Buccaneers for 3 years before going to the Stars, and then he played for the Packers 1 year after. He's just... As I said, he's just in the league. He won the USFL's Game MVP award in 1984 for winning the title. Well, he won the MVP in the title game. Won the title twice. He was the Outstanding Quarterback of the Year once. He was the Sporting News' Player of the Year in 84 as well. Solid career in the league. Outside of the league, not really. Mike Lush, a defensive back. He played for the Stars for a few years. Then he played for the Colts, Vikings, and Bears over the next 2 years. Another guy just good in the USFL, and that was pretty much it. Garcia Lane, pretty much the same thing. After playing 2 years for the Stars, he would play 2 different seasons with the Chiefs, and that was his whole career. And now we get to the guys who remembers the all-time team. So there are 2 players who are on second team all-time. One of them being Antonio Gibson, a cornerback/safety. He played on the team all 3 years, and then he played for the Saints for about 4 years. Then he would play as a practice squad member, and then he was in... That was pretty much it. He played in another one of those random leagues in 1992 for the Birmingham Fire, and then played for the Saints 1 year. He was in the USFL's all-time team, that was pretty much it. He did start 36 games in the NFL, and he did get 3 interceptions. And then his time in the Birmingham Fire in the World League of American Football was just, USFL legend. Then you had Chuck Comiskey, guard/center. He was on the all-league teams, and then he was second team all-time. He played for the Eagles 1 year before going to the Stars, and then afterward he would go on to play for the Saints for about 3 years. He would start 14 games in his career, another guy who was a USFL legend. Now, most of these guys actually had a legit career before or after, and these are the members of the first team list. Head coach Jim Mora, he, of course, is known famous for making a single word into a question in the word playoffs. But aside from making that single word into a question, he's a pretty good coach. So his first time being a professional coach really was with the Stars. After he became the Saints head coach for like 10 years, and then he'd be the Colts head coach for a couple years. He was an NFL Coach of the Year in '86. He's in the New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame. He did amass over 100 wins in the NFL, going 125 and 106. Though in the NFL, he went 0-6 in the playoffs versus the USFL, where he went 7-1. Safe to say which he did better in. But overall, he's a legend in football, if not for just one insanely great meme and interview thing. But yeah, solid. Then you had defensive end Pete Kugler. Before going to the Stars, he was a 3-time champion with the San Francisco 49ers. He was on their roster from 81 to 83, went to the USFL, and then came back from 86 to 90. He actually ended up getting 12.5 sacks over his career, so it's not like he did nothing during his career as just a bench warmer. So yeah, 3-time Super Bowl champ and a 2-time USFL champ. That's pretty good. First team member. Another first team member was their center, Bart Oates, who was also a 3-time champion. After the Stars, he would play from the Giants from 85 to 93, and then he played 2 years for the Niners, from 94 to 95. He won 3 Super Bowls, and he was actually a 5-time Pro Bowler. He started 165 games. That's pretty solid if I tell you what. He was a starting member of the offensive line of both Giants Super Bowl teams and the San Francisco 49ers. Overall, really solid career, great player, center. He's one of the guys not only a USFL legend, but he's probably one of the more underappreciated centers in league history, since he was kind of there for 3 different Super Bowl teams. And then after that, we get to a couple other guys. We have the man who went 6 for 6 on being on the All-League and All-Star teams, Irv Eatman. After the Stars, he would be on the Chiefs for 5 years, the Jets for 2, the Rams for 1, Falcons for 1, and the Oilers for 2. He wouldn't be as great in the league as Bart Oates, but he's still solid. He started 118 games, which is pretty solid. That was pretty much it in terms of that, but as I said, he played 100 games, and that's despite the fact that when he was drafted in the NFL in '83, he was an 8th-round pick. So, I don't know about you, but that's pretty solid to me. Next is William Fuller, defensive end. After the Stars, he would play for the Oilers from 86 to 93, then the Eagles from 94 to 96, and then the Chargers 97-98. He actually was an All-Pro. He was a second-team All-Pro in 95, and he was a 4-time Pro Bowler during his career. He's a North Carolina Tar Heel legend. His jersey is actually honored. He was 2-time All-American, and he is in the College Football Hall of Fame. That's pretty solid. The man in the NFL actually did do something else that's pretty cool, and that's that he actually hit 100 sacks in the NFL. So, despite playing 3 years in the USFL, he still managed over 100 sacks, which is pretty incredible if you ask me. So, the man, he saw it. You gotta give him his credit. He's great. Yeah. And then, despite being as great as he is, there's still 3 guys that are, without a doubt, better than him in some way. The first of what I would say are probably the big 3 Philadelphia Stars, Baltimore Stars players, is Sean Landeta. Sean Landeta is one of the all-time greatest punters in football history. Despite playing 3 years of his career in the USFL, he managed to play from 1985 to 2006 in the NFL, being on a team every year. Not only that, but when he retired in 2006, he was the last active player who have played on the USFL team. He is on the St. Louis Rams' 20th anniversary team. He only played there 2 years. He's on the Philadelphia Eagles' 75th anniversary team. He only played there 1 year. He's on the Giants' all-time team. He's on both the 80s and 90s all-decade team. He's on the ESPN 40th anniversary Super Bowl team. Oh yeah, he has 2 rings in the NFL. He also was a 2-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time first-team All-Pro. He's got 60,000 career punting yards. He averaged 43 yards a punt. He is, without a doubt, one of the best punters to ever play the game. And even though he became eligible for Hall of Fame, he's probably not going to get in the Hall of Fame, sadly, because he's a punter, and unless you're a Ray guy or probably in the next couple years Shane Leckler, you're not getting in. But he is, without a doubt, one of the greatest punters ever, and Stars nailed it with him. Great pick, great addition. Next, we have the guy who has a legit case to be known as the greatest USFL player of all time in Kelvin Bryant. Why does he have that? Well, he not only won league MVP in 1983, he was a two-time All-USFL selection the first 2 years. He won the title twice, and in 1985 when they won the title, he actually won title game MVP, which, I mean, it shows that he's pretty good. I'm just saying, pretty good player. And he does have one ring with the Washington Redskins because he played with them from 86 to 90. But he's also a North Carolina Tar Heel jersey honored player. But overall, as I said, he has a legit case to be it. He's one of the all-time leading rushers. Not the all-time leading rusher, but he's up there. And he's a great player. I mean, a legend. And then last is the man who I just made a video about because he just got into the Professional Football Hall of Fame, linebacker Sam Mills. Sam Mills, after signing with the Stars, played for the Saints from 86 to 94, being part of the legendary Dome Patrol linebacker group, and then was part of the Panthers from 95 to 97 as a player, and then assistant coach or linebackers coach from 98 to 2004. He was a first-team All-Pro, a two-time second-team All-Pro, a five-time Pro Bowler. On the USFL, he made it to the USFL All-Star All-League team 5 out of the 6 times. He won the league's title twice naturally. He's on the all-time team. His number is retired from the Panthers. He's in the Panthers and Saints Hall of Fame, Ring of Honor, whatever they are, for each. He's in the Professional Football Hall of Fame and College Football Hall of Fame. He is, without a doubt, the best star to ever play due to what his career was afterward, as even though it took him to his literal last bout to get in the Hall of Fame, he did get in the Hall of Fame, and he's a legend. I mean, he's in the Professional Football Hall of Fame. Aside from Jim Kelly, now he's the only member of the 8 teams they brought back that in the original is in the Hall of Fame, which is a pretty distinct honor. So, overall, the Stars, it's pretty easy to see why people believe they could have competed with NFL teams. When you have multiple guys who are all Pro or Pro Bowl caliber players, that means you're pretty good. You have a Hall of Famer in Sam Mills. Kelvin Bryant was awesome for his time in the USFL. Sean Landeta is an awesome punter all time. And then you had guys who were just great in that league, like Irv Eatman, or you had Bart Oates, who was great. William Fuller got 100 sacks. I mean, Carl Peterson was quite arguably the best GM in that league. Pretty much unarguable that he was the best GM in that league. It's just, they definitely could have been it. Their players, it speaks to how good their players, coaching, and everything was. They legit were the best team in that league. Unarguably, not even close to any team. And it's just, they were genuinely great. Now, as for the series, I want to just talk about it. This series has been really nice. I like making these. I like being able to have people learn about the original USFL and learn about teams and stuff. As of now, the 2 most viewed ones I have, I believe, are the Pittsburgh Maulers and the New Orleans Breakers, who are probably the 2 least known teams of the 8 that are coming back. And now that the season is starting up in only like a couple months, and that we have the draft coming up literally like a couple days after I'm recording this, you have information about players and practice squads and stuff coming in. I'm not really going to do more of this series in terms of the teams that aren't coming back, teams like the Denver Gold or the Orlando Renegades / Federals. But once this season, the 2022 inaugural season ends, I will gladly pick up this series and continue it during the teams that aren't in the league now or might be in it next year. But overall, this series has been great. And this has been Zomfox. If you guys like this content or want to be notified whenever you see new content, new news about the USFL, or you just like this series, subscribe, hit the bell, and remember to have a great night.